What you're about to discover was not lost to time. It was erased. It was buried beneath layers of doctrine and empire because it revealed a truth more liberating than any system could control. For 2,000 years, a story has echoed through the halls of history, a story of a savior who died for our sins, binding humanity to a narrative of inherent guilt, cosmic debt, and conditional redemption. But far from the gilded basilicas of Rome, high in the mist-shrouded mountains of Ethiopia, an ancient lineage of faith has quietly guarded a different testament. Within the pages of their sacred texts, protected by the devotion of centuries, lies a story not of payment, but of passage. A story not of a god who demanded sacrifice, but of a master who demonstrated the path to unlocking the divine light hidden within ourselves. This is the truth that was silenced, and today its voice rises from the dust. Imagine the air, thin and cool, carrying the scent of ancient stone and burning incense. Picture mountains that touch the heavens, where monasteries are carved into the very rock, suspended between earth and sky. This is the land of Aksum, one of the first empires on earth to hear the message of the Christ, long before that message was forged into a tool for a new global power. Here, faith is not a relic of the past. It is a living, breathing river, a direct and unbroken current flowing from the earliest, most mystical springs of Christianity. This is not the periphery of the story. This is a forgotten center, a sanctuary where an ancestral memory was kept safe while the world was taught to forget. What if the key to a deeper understanding of our own spiritual nature was never truly lost, but simply waiting in a place the world had forgotten to look? In these sacred highlands, they do not hold a mere book. They safeguard a library of the soul, the Mashafer Kidus. To the Western eye, it is an anomaly, a Bible of 81 books, not 66. It contains texts that were deemed dangerous, heretical, or inconvenient and cast out by imperial councils, the Book of Enoch, the Book of Jubilees. But here, they are not additions. They are the missing chapters of a grander cosmic story. These forgotten scriptures paint a different portrait of existence, one where the fundamental conflict is not between a wrathful God and a sinful humanity. Instead, it is a struggle between the boundless divine potential sleeping within us and the subtle forces of ignorance and control that seek to keep it dormant. This ancient wisdom speaks of a path not to forgiveness, but to remembrance. Have you ever felt it? A quiet dissonance with the story you were told, a feeling deep in your core that there must be more, a sense that the narrative of being born, broken, forever in need of an external savior, somehow diminishes the vast, silent power you can feel stirring within you in moments of profound stillness. This feeling is not a flaw in your faith. It is a whisper from your own ancestral memory, a faint echo of a truth that was taken from you. The journey we are about to begin is not for the passive observer. It is for the awakening seeker, the one who has always suspected that the map they were given is incomplete, and who is brave enough to seek out the missing pieces. What changes when you realize you are not a debtor, but an inheritor of a forgotten legacy? The revelation preserved in the heart of Africa is a key, one that unlocks a different door to the temple of the self. It reframes the ultimate sacrifice, not as a payment for our inadequacy, but as a triumphant demonstration of our potential. It is a story of liberation so profound that it threatened to dismantle an empire before it was even built. If you feel the pull of this ancient mystery, if you are ready to journey beyond the veil of accepted history and reclaim a piece of your spiritual inheritance, then we invite you to join this circle. Subscribe and walk with us into the heart of this hidden knowledge. For the truths that were buried are now returning to the light. The age of forgetting is over. The great remembering has begun. To understand what was hidden, we must first journey back to a time before the cross was a symbol of empire, when the message of the Christ was not a single codified doctrine, but a vibrant and wild tapestry of myriad spiritual streams. In the bustling ports of Alexandria, the desert caves of the Gnostic hermits, and the philosophical schools of Antioch, 1,000 different flowers of interpretation bloomed. This was an age of direct experience, of mystical inquiry, of a faith that was still fluid, alive, and intensely personal. It was a world where divinity was not a distant concept to be worshipped, but a living fire to be kindled within the human soul. There was no central authority, no single book, no unyielding creed forged in the fires of political necessity. There was only the source, and the countless paths that led from it. This was the world into which the revelation was born, and it is the world that the rising powers of a new age sought to tame. But far from the political currents and theological battlegrounds of the Mediterranean, nestled in the protective embrace of Africa's high mountains, the kingdom of Aksum received this spiritual light in its purest form. Their connection was not filtered through the lens of Roman ambition or Greek philosophy. It was a direct inheritance, an unmediated current of ancestral wisdom. Imagine a faith taking root not in conquered lands, but in sovereign soil, nurtured by a people whose history was already ancient and profound. The mist that clings to the Ethiopian highlands became a veil, protecting this nascent understanding from the homogenizing forces that would soon sweep across the world. Here, the story of the Christ was not a tool for assimilation into a foreign empire. It was a key that unlocked deeper chambers within their own ancient spiritual traditions. This isolation was not a weakness. It was the very condition that allowed a sacred truth to be preserved, like a rare seed kept safe in a mountain sanctuary while a great storm raged across the plains below. That storm began to gather in the 4th century. The Roman Empire, a colossal machine of conquest and administration, was beginning to fracture under its own weight. It needed a new kind of glue, a unifying ideology powerful enough to bind its diverse and restless populations. In a stroke of geopolitical genius, the Emperor Constantine saw in the burgeoning Christian faith not just a spiritual movement, but the perfect instrument of statecraft. But the raw, untamed spirituality of early Christianity, with its emphasis on inner revelation and personal gnosis, was ungovernable. It was too diverse, too empowering to the individual. For the faith to serve the empire, it had to be reshaped. It needed a single unified narrative, a clear hierarchy, and a doctrine that inspired obedience, not just awakening. The imperial machine had found its new soul, and it would now begin the slow, meticulous process of forging it into a tool of control. The Council of Nicaea was the great forge where this new soul was hammered into shape. We are taught to see it as a holy gathering of wise patriarchs seeking divine truth. But it was also a political summit, an imperial project to create a standardized, state-sanctioned religion. Imagine the scene. Not silent mystics in candlelit chambers, but powerful bishops, strategists, and politicians debating clauses and doctrines as if they were drafting imperial law. The central question was no longer simply, what is the path to the divine? But rather, what version of this story best serves the stability and unity of the Roman Empire? In this cold, pragmatic light, certain truths become inconvenient. Certain texts become dangerous. A message of individual liberation becomes a threat to collective control. And so, the great pruning began. The vibrant garden of early Christian thought was trimmed and cut back until only one tree was allowed to stand, its branches shaped to support the architecture of a new world order. What was the most profound cut of all? It was the deliberate reframing of the crucifixion. The ancient wisdom, preserved in texts that would soon be labeled heretical, spoke of the Christ as a liberator, a revealer of a hidden knowledge that could break the cosmic chains holding humanity in a state of spiritual amnesia. This path empowered the individual to achieve their own gnosis, their own direct reunion with the divine source. But a kingdom of awakened, spiritually sovereign individuals cannot be easily ruled. A far more useful narrative was one of inherited debt. The doctrine of original sin cast humanity as fundamentally flawed, born into a spiritual prison and incapable of freeing itself. In this story, the crucifixion becomes not a demonstration of our potential, but a payment for our inadequacy. Christ is no longer the guide who shows us the door out of the prison. He is the warden's son who pays our bail, leaving us forever indebted and dependent on the institution he left behind. Why was this truth lost? Because a message of empowerment creates masters, while a message of debt creates subjects. This shift initiated a great forgetting, a slow and pervasive spiritual amnesia that would come to define Western civilization. For centuries that followed, entire libraries of sacred texts were cast out, their wisdom deemed dangerous. Manuscripts were burned, oral traditions were silenced, and lineages of mystical knowledge were driven underground or extinguished completely. Generations were born into a world where the story of debt was the only story they knew, a truth so foundational it became as invisible and essential as the air they breathed. Have you ever felt it, that quiet, nagging sense that the spiritual map you were given is missing a continent? That feeling is not a failure of your faith. It is a whisper from your own ancestral memory, a faint echo of the vast spiritual territory that was deliberately erased from the charts, a forgotten legacy calling to be remembered. And yet, in the highlands of Ethiopia, the memory was not extinguished. It was guarded. While the libraries of the West were being purged, the scribes and monks of Aksum continued to copy their sacred texts, including those the new empire had cast aside. Their geographic isolation became a spiritual fortress, their political independence a shield. They kept safe the Book of Enoch and its detailed cosmology of fallen angels and cosmic struggle. They preserved traditions that spoke not of a distant, judgmental God, but of an intimate, accessible, divine presence. They held onto a version of the faith that was not about escaping a fallen world, but about realizing the divine blueprint hidden within it. They became a living time capsule, a silent witness to the truth that was suppressed. The question that echoes from those silent mountains is not merely what was written in their forgotten books, but why its rediscovery now threatens to change everything we thought we knew about our own divine nature. The proof of this forgotten legacy is not found in a single dusty scroll, but is woven into the very fabric of an ancient land. It is written in the ink of forbidden books, chanted in the echoes of stone-carved churches, and carried in the breath of a people who never forgot. This is not a theory pieced together from fragments. It is a living, breathing testament, a library of the soul that has weathered the storms of empire and time. The first and most profound piece of evidence is the Meshafe Kedus itself, the Ethiopian Bible. To hold it is to feel the weight of silenced history. Its 81 books stand as a silent rebuke to the 66-book canon of the West, a mathematical proof that something was taken away. It is here, within its sacred pages, that we find the key to this entire mystery, the Book of Enoch. Cast out by the Roman Church, deemed too strange and too revealing, this text was preserved in its entirety only in the ancient Ge'ez language of Ethiopia. And what it describes is not a simple story of good versus evil, but a cosmic drama of immense scale. Enoch speaks of the Watchers, celestial beings who descended and interfered with humanity, binding it with chains of materialism and ignorance. This paints a picture of a world not merely sinful but ensnared, a spiritual territory occupied by forces that seek to keep humanity asleep. If this is the true nature of our world, then the mission of a savior would not be to pay a debt for our moral failings, but to break the chains of our cosmic prison. The Book of Enoch provides the lost cosmology, the missing context for a story we thought we knew, and its survival in Ethiopia is the first thread that unravels the entire tapestry of control. This ancient wisdom, however, was not confined to the mountains of Africa alone. For a time, it was a current that flowed throughout the early Christian world, a hidden knowledge whispered in the deserts of Egypt and the philosophical schools of the Near East. In 1945, a clay jar was unearthed near Nag Hammadi, Egypt, and what it contained sent shockwaves through the world of theology. It was a library of lost gospels, texts from the Gnostic tradition that had been systematically hunted and destroyed by the early imperial church. And within these scrolls, a startlingly similar story emerged. They spoke not of original sin, but of divine sparks trapped in a material world, a world fashioned not by a perfect God, but by a lesser, ignorant creator they called the demiurge, who ruled through his archons, the very same cosmic jailers described in the Book of Enoch. These texts, like the Gospel of Thomas and the Gospel of Philip, portray Jesus not as a sacrificial lamb, but as a revealer of gnosis, a secret knowledge that awakens the divine spark within each person and allows them to escape the prison of the archons. Why would two distinct spiritual traditions, one preserved in the highlands of Ethiopia and the other buried in the sands of Egypt, both tell the same story of cosmic entrapment and liberation? The answer is as simple as it is profound, because it was the original truth, a powerful spiritual revelation that was deemed too dangerous for an empire to allow. The discovery at Nag Hammadi was the echo, confirming the song that Ethiopia had never stopped singing. The evidence is not only written, it is lived. To witness a ceremony in an ancient Ethiopian Orthodox church is to step outside of time. The air grows thick with the sweet, heavy smoke of frankincense, a scent that has filled these holy places for millennia. The priests, draped in robes of vibrant color, chant the liturgy in the ancient tongue of Ge'ez, a language that has carried these sacred vibrations since the time of Aksum. Their prayers are not the quiet, somber petitions of the West, but powerful rhythmic incantations, a wave of sound that seems to resonate deep within the bones. This is not a religion of the book alone, it is a religion of sound, of scent, of embodied memory. Their oral traditions, passed from master to student in the quiet solitude of mountain monasteries, carry nuances and interpretations that were never committed to the page. They speak of mysteries, of the inner alchemy of the soul, of a path of awakening that is gradual and profound. This living tradition is a vibrational archive, a form of proof that cannot be burned or erased, for it is stored in the hearts and memories of the faithful. It is a testament to the fact that the deepest knowledge is not always contained in doctrine, but is preserved in the sacred current of a living, unbroken lineage. What secrets are encoded in a chant that has been repeated for 2,000 years? What ancestral memory is awakened by an incense that has been burned in offering since before the time of the Christ? The very earth of Ethiopia bears witness to this protected truth. High on a mountain plateau, carved from the living volcanic rock, stand the churches of Lalibela. These are not buildings constructed stone by stone, but monumental sculptures hewn downwards into the ground, a city of faith hidden from the world. To walk through their cool subterranean passages is to feel a sense of profound sanctuary. They are a metaphor made manifest, a faith that was not imposed upon the world, but drawn from its very heart, a truth so sacred it had to be shielded, dug out from the earth itself, protected from the view of those who would seek to reshape or destroy it. Each of the 11 churches is a sermon in stone, a testament to a spiritual sovereignty that refused to bend to the will of foreign empires. They were built to represent a new Jerusalem, but they also represent a new kind of fortress, a spiritual fortress, where a legacy could be kept safe. The hands that carved these churches were not just building a place of worship, they were engraving a promise into the planet itself, a vow to safeguard a knowledge that the rest of the world was being taught to forget. These monolithic structures are not ruins of a lost faith. They are the unshakable pillars of a wisdom that has endured. Even the central symbol of the faith, the cross, is understood through a different lens here. In the West, it became the ultimate symbol of suffering and payment, a constant reminder of an inherited debt. But in the context of this more ancient cosmic wisdom, the cross is transformed. It is not a symbol of transaction, but of transition. It is the place where the veil between worlds grew thin, the stage upon which the liberator performed the final act of initiation. The nails were not a payment for sin, they were pins holding a cosmic map in place. His struggle was not with the wrath of a distant father, but with the shadowy forces of the archons, the very jailers of humanity's consciousness. His triumph was not in appeasing God, but in shattering the illusion of their power, demonstrating that the human spirit, fully aligned with its divine source, is more powerful than any chain, any prison, any fear of death. The resurrection in this light is not a singular miracle for one man, but the ultimate demonstration of a universal potential. It is the proof that the divine spark within us cannot be extinguished by the forces of the material world. This is the good news that was silenced, not that your debt has been paid, but that your chains have been broken. Therefore the proofs are all around us, for those with eyes to see and ears to hear. They are in the expanded canon of the Meshafer Kedus, in the celestial revelations of the Book of Enoch, and in the corroborating whispers of the Gnostic Gospels from the Egyptian desert. They are in the living, breathing rituals of an unbroken faith, and in the silent, enduring testimony of the stone churches of Lalibela. Together, they form a mosaic of a truth that was not lost, but intentionally hidden. Each piece points to the same stunning revelation. The story of Christ was not originally about paying for sin. It was a manual for spiritual liberation, a roadmap for the soul's journey out of a cosmic prison and back to its divine origin. This knowledge survived not by chance, but by a sacred commitment, guarded for centuries in the heart of Africa, waiting for an age when humanity would be ready to remember. That age is now. The evidence has been laid before you. What then does this revelation truly mean for the path of your own soul? This knowledge does not come to you as a new idea to be debated by the intellect. It arrives as a resonance, a deep and ancient hum that vibrates in the forgotten chambers of your own soul. For centuries, the spirit of the West has been walking with a limp, haunted by a story that taught it was born broken, forever leaning on the crutch of external salvation. The revelation from the Ethiopian highlands is not a crutch, it is a healing. It is the memory of a time before the wound, a truth that reminds you how to walk on your own 2 feet, sovereign and whole. This is the quiet ache in the soul of the modern world, the source of a nameless spiritual hunger. It is a phantom limb, the feeling of a power and a divinity that was amputated from our collective story so long ago that we were taught to believe it was never there at all. What changes within you when the foundation of your identity shifts from sinner to inheritor? The sinner lives in a cosmic prison, their eyes fixed on the ground, forever reciting the list of their failings and begging for a pardon from a distant warden. Their life is a sentence to be served, but the inheritor stands in a sacred temple, the temple of their own body and consciousness, and understands that they hold the keys. Their gaze is lifted to the stars, not in supplication, but in recognition of their own celestial origin. Their life is not a trial, but a quest, a journey to remember the forgotten blueprint of their own divinity and to rebuild the temple from within. This is the great awakening this hidden knowledge offers. It is an invitation to lay down the weight of a debt you never owed and to pick up the scepter of a kingdom you forgot was yours. But if this is true, why does the world still feel like a prison for so many? The answer is as subtle as it is pervasive. The archons, the cosmic jailers described in the Book of Enoch and the Gnostic texts, were never defeated by a single event in history. They simply changed their form. Their iron chains were melted down and recast into the invisible shackles of the modern age. The fear that is amplified by the endless cycle of news, the distraction that is sold as connection through the glowing screens in our hands, the dogma that demands conformity over inner truth, and the relentless noise of a world that fears silence above all else. These are the new archons, the guardians of the modern prison of the mind. They work to keep humanity in a state of spiritual amnesia, addicted to the superficial and terrified of the profound depths that lie within. The ancient struggle for liberation is not a story from the past. It is happening right now, inside of you. The path of the liberator, then, is not one of passive belief, but of active, courageous remembrance. It is the sacred art of unforgetting. It requires one to turn away from the cacophony of the world and listen to the silence that it tries so desperately to drown out. It is in that silence that the ancestral memory speaks. To walk this path is to become a spiritual archaeologist, digging through the layers of your own conditioning, through the rubble of beliefs that were given to you but are not truly yours. It is to face the shadowy jailers within your own consciousness, your deepest fears, your most limiting beliefs, and to realize, as the great liberator demonstrated, that they only have the power that you give them. This is not a comfortable journey. It is a path of fire and shadow, a sacred alchemy that burns away all that is not essential, until only the indestructible divine spark remains. And here the tension rises, for this revelation carries with it an immense and urgent responsibility. To reclaim this knowledge is to stand at a great crossroads. One path leads back into the comfortable slumber of the old story, the familiar prison where the rules are known and the thinking is done for you. The other path leads into the wild, untamed wilderness of spiritual sovereignty. It is a path of greater challenge, but also of infinite possibility. The systems that erased this truth 2,000 years ago have not vanished. They have evolved. They continue to thrive on our forgetting, on our belief that we are small, powerless, and in need of their guidance. To awaken to your own inner divinity is a revolutionary act. It is to withdraw your energy from the architecture of control and to begin investing it in the temple of your own soul. What does a world look like when millions of people stop asking for permission to be free? Have you ever felt it in a moment of profound stillness, perhaps looking at a star-filled sky or feeling the earth beneath your bare feet? A silent, powerful hum beneath the surface of your thoughts. A sense of belonging not to a nation or a creed, but to the cosmos itself. That feeling is not imagination. It is a signal from your deepest self, an echo of the truth that has been preserved for you across the ages. It is the memory of your own divinity, stirring from its long sleep. The Ethiopian Testament and the Gnostic Gospels are not just historical documents, they are vibrational keys designed to tune your consciousness back to that original sacred frequency. They are a map, written in a language of symbol and spirit, leading you back to the source of that silent hum. This brings us to the very heart of the mystery, to the foot of the cross itself. We have journeyed from the highlands of Africa to the deserts of Egypt. We have uncovered the evidence and felt its resonance within our own being. We have understood what was hidden and why. Now we must dare to look upon the central event of this entire story with new eyes. We must ask the most dangerous question of all. If the crucifixion was not a payment for sin, Then what was it? The ancient wisdom whispers that it was something far more profound, an alchemical process of cosmic significance, a deliberate and triumphant act of spiritual warfare. What if the cross was not an altar of sacrifice but a gateway, a portal through which a master of energy demonstrated for all to see how to dismantle the very matrix of fear and death that holds our world in its grip? Imagine the scene, etched into the consciousness of the world. A hill outside a city wall, 3 crosses, against a darkening sky. For 2,000 years, we have been told to look upon this moment through a lens of sorrow, guilt, and debt. We have been taught that this was a transaction, a divine payment for a flaw inherent in our own souls. But the ancient wisdom, the truth preserved in the mountain sanctuary of Ethiopia, asks you to look again. It asks you to wipe the dust of empire from your eyes and see this moment for what it truly was. This was not an altar of sacrifice. It was the final battlefield in a cosmic war for consciousness itself. This is the turning point, the revelation that changes everything. The liberator was not paying a debt to a wrathful God. He was confronting the jailers of the human spirit, the archons, on their own ground and in the full view of the heavens. This is the truth that was so dangerous it had to be buried beneath a doctrine of sin. The God of the liberator was not a cosmic creditor demanding blood to balance a ledger. That image, the image of a demanding and vengeful deity, is the very signature of the archons themselves, the lesser ignorant powers who rule the material realm through fear and limitation. The great inversion, the masterstroke of the imperial machine, was to project the face of the jailer onto the very concept of God. They took a story of liberation from cosmic tyranny and twisted it into a story of submission to a divine tyrant. The liberator's mission was never to appease a father, it was to expose a fraud. He came to show that the powers that hold humanity in bondage are a grand illusion, a shadow play that dissolves in the light of awakened divinity. What does this mean for you, for the story written in your own soul? It means the foundational premise of your inherited guilt is a lie. You were not born into debt. You were born into a spiritual territory under occupation, a dream from which you have not yet awakened. The feeling of being flawed, of being separate from the divine, is not a sign of your sinfulness. It is the very atmosphere of the prison, a pervasive frequency of fear and ignorance broadcast by the forces of control. The liberator's great work was to create a tear in that prison wall, to demonstrate that another reality, a state of divine union and sovereign freedom, is not only possible but is your original birthright. You are not a sinner in need of a pardon. You are a royal heir, born with amnesia, living in a cell whose door has always been unlocked. Look again at the cross. In this forgotten legacy, it is not a symbol of death and payment. It is a tool of cosmic alchemy. It represents the intersection of the vertical and the horizontal, the meeting place of spirit and matter, of heaven and earth. By allowing himself to be nailed to this intersection, the liberator willingly became the focal point, the very eye of the storm. He pinned the illusion of the material world in place, holding it still so he could perform the great work upon it. His suffering was not a punishment, but a process, an intense, energetic transmutation. He was absorbing into his own being the accumulated fear, ignorance, and limitation of the human experience, not to pay for it, but to dissolve it from within, transforming the poison into medicine through the sheer force of his divine consciousness. His final words, therefore, were not the plea of a victim. They were the declarations of a master. When he cried out, my God, why have you forsaken me?" It was not a cry of despair, but the recitation of an ancient psalm, a coded message to those with ears to hear, signaling the beginning of the final phase of the initiation. And when he breathed his last, declaring, "It is finished," he was not announcing that the debt was paid. He was proclaiming that the mission was accomplished, the illusion was shattered, the spell was broken. The path out of the prison had been cleared for all who would have the courage to walk it. He had successfully anchored a new frequency on the planet, a vibrational pathway of liberation that could never again be erased. The resurrection, then, is not a singular miracle to be worshipped. It is the ultimate proof of the teaching, the triumphant final demonstration. It is the irrefutable evidence that the Archon's greatest weapon, the fear of death, is a powerless illusion. The Liberator showed that the divine spark within a human being, when fully realized and awakened, cannot be contained by the laws of the material world. It cannot be extinguished by pain, by darkness, or by the grave itself. He did not rise from the dead simply for his own glory. He rose to show every single soul that has ever lived or will ever live what lies dormant within them. He was the first to complete the journey, mapping the way and leaving the gate wide open behind him. This is the legacy that was stolen from you, the inheritance that was replaced with a promissory note of eternal debt. The good news was not that someone paid for your sins. The good news was that sin itself, as a state of cosmic separation and inherent brokenness, is an illusion created by the forces that seek to control you. The revelation preserved in the heart of Africa is a key, a harmonic that can unlock the chains of that ancient lie within your own consciousness. It invites you to step out of the role of the guilty debtor and into the reality of the divine inheritor. It is a call to stop praying for salvation and to start participating in your own liberation. And so the map of your own spiritual potential has been laid bare. The journey of the Liberator was a blueprint, a step-by-step manual for the alchemy of the soul. He demonstrated how to face the forces of limitation, how to transmute fear into power, and how to realize a state of being that transcends death itself. The path has been shown, the gate has been opened, but this ancient wisdom, this lost truth, carries with it one final chilling secret. The path is open, but it is not unguarded. The forces that were defeated on that hill 2,000 years ago did not simply vanish. They adapted. And the question that now hangs in the air, heavy as an approaching storm, is this: if the old jailers simply changed their uniforms, how do we recognize them today? The jailers of today do not carry iron keys or wear the armor of a Roman legion. They are far more subtle, for they have learned that the most effective prison is the one we build for ourselves. They are the endless scroll of distraction that keeps your eyes from the sky. They are the 24-hour cycle of fear broadcast into your home, a constant low hum of anxiety designed to make you feel small and powerless. They are the dogmas, scientific, religious, and political, that tell you to trust the institution over your own inner knowing. They are the culture of noise that makes silence feel threatening, because in the silence, you might just hear the whisper of your own forgotten divinity. The Archons of old never left. They simply became the architects of a new matrix, a prison of the mind that thrives on one single foundational lie: that you are anything less than a sovereign creator of your own reality. To recognize them is the first act of rebellion. To turn away from their noise and listen to your own heart is the first step toward freedom. This, then, is the great remembering to which you have been called. The revelation, carried in the heart of Africa like a secret flame, is not just a revision of history. It is a restoration of your soul's true identity. For 2,000 years, you have been handed a ledger book and told to focus on your debts. But the Meshafe Kedus, the library of the soul, hands you a key and points to a locked door within yourself. The story was never about a god who needed to be appeased. It was always about a divine spark within you that needed to be awakened. It was never about a sin that needed to be paid for. It was always about a spell of amnesia